The letter arrived creased and damp, its edges bruised from a long journey that had begun with hope and ended in quiet rejection. And Eliza May Carter stood on the wooden platform of the small frontier town, clutching it like a verdict she could not appeal, her breath fogging the cold air as the train hissed away and left her alone beneath a gray, western sky that felt too wide for someone with nowhere to go. She had crossed half a continent, answering an advertisement that promised marriage, safety, and a place to belong. A mail-order arrangement, common enough in these rough territories. But when she arrived, the man who had written to her would not even step down from his porch to meet her eyes. His sister had come instead, lips tight with embarrassment, and said there had been a mistake, that he had found someone else, that Eliza should return east if she could, as though coin and pride were things a woman like her carried in abundance. Now the sister's words echoed in Eliza's ears as she stood shivering, a single valise at her feet, wondering how rejection could feel heavier than hunger, heavier even than fear. She had no family to return to, no money for another ticket, and no strength left to beg. All she had was the stubborn will that had brought her west in the first place, and quite resolved not to cry in public. As the afternoon wore on, townsfolk passed her with curious glances, some pitying, some calculating, until the wind sharpened and the platform emptied, leaving Eliza with the sound of her own heartbeat and the sense that the world had decided she was expendable. It was then that a tall man in a sheriff's coat approached, his boots steady, his presence calm in a way that made the air feel less hostile. And though he asked only a simple question whether she needed help, Eliza felt something inside her shift, a flicker of safety she did not dare trust. Sheriff Caleb Rowan had seen hardship before. It came with the badge and the land. But there was something about the way this woman stood alone, spine straight despite defeat, that stirred a protective instinct he had long learned to keep buried. And as he listened to her halting explanation, he sensed a wrong that went deeper than a failed arrangement. He offered her a meal, then a place to stay for the night at the jailhouse guest room, a practical solution delivered in a voice that brooked no argument. And Eliza, with no better options and too tired to refuse kindness, nodded and followed him through the dust and fading light, unaware that the man offering her shelter carried secrets as old and wild as the hills surrounding the town. The jailhouse was sturdy and plain, built to withstand both weather and men, and as Eliza sat at the small table eating stew that warmed her hands and belly, she felt the tight knot inside her loosen for the first time since the train had stopped, though she remained keenly aware of the sheriff's presence across the room, his quiet watchfulness both reassuring and unsettling. Caleb spoke little as she ate, asking only what was necessary, listening more than he talked, and Eliza found herself filling the silence with fragments of her past, of losing her parents young, of working herself raw as a seamstress, of seeing the advertisement as a chance at dignity rather than romance, while Caleb absorbed every word with an intensity that made her feel seen rather than judged. What she did not see were the small signs he fought to hide, the way his senses sharpened when her voice wavered, the low growl of anger he swallowed when she described the man who had dismissed her like an inconvenience, the way the moon rising outside tugged at something feral beneath his skin. Caleb Rowan was a shifter, a man bound to a wolf spirit passed down through generations, sworn to protect this land and the people on it. And he had learned, through hard years, to balance the beast within with the law he upheld. But Eliza's presence stirred the wolf in ways he had not anticipated, awakening an ancient instinct to claim and guard. That night, as Eliza slept fitfully in the small room, Caleb paced the hallway, listening to every creak, every breath, ensuring no harm came to her, even as he reminded himself she was only a woman in need, not fate's cruel temptation. In the morning he offered her work, temporary, respectable, helping the town's schoolteacher in sewing uniforms, and a room to rent above the general store, arrangements made swiftly as though he had been preparing for her arrival without knowing it. Eliza accepted with gratitude tinged with disbelief, marveling at how quickly despair had given way to fragile hope. And as days turned into a tentative routine, she began to see Caleb not just as a sheriff but as a man shaped by solitude, his kindness edged with restraint, his smiles rare but genuine. She did not notice how often his gaze followed her, how he positioned himself between her and danger without conscious thought, or how the wolf within him watched her with golden-eyed devotion, sensing a bond neither of them yet understood. The trouble came on a night when the moon was full and bright, casting silver shadows across the town and stirring unrest among men, already prone to violence, and when a group of drifters, emboldened by drink and cruelty, cornered Eliza on her walk home, her heart leaped into her throat as she realized how thin her newfound safety truly was. Their words were crude, their intentions clear, and though Eliza stood her ground as best she could, fear seeped into her bones until a familiar voice cut through the night, calm and commanding, sending the men scattering with the promise of the law's swift hand. Caleb escorted her home in silence, his jaw tight, the wolf raging beneath his skin at the scent of her fear. And when she thanked him with trembling sincerity, something in his restraint finally cracked. He warned her to stay inside after dark, his tone harsher than intended, then turned away before she could ask questions, retreating into the hills where he could shed both badge and man and run beneath. The moon, claws digging into earth as he let the wolf burn off its fury. Eliza, watching his silhouette vanish, felt a strange ache, a pull she could not name, and though she told herself it was gratitude, she sensed there was more to the sheriff than the town knew. Days later, rumors spread of livestock killed beyond the usual patterns, of glowing eyes seen at the edge of campfires, and fear crept through the town, sharpening suspicion while Caleb grew more distant, torn between protecting Eliza and protecting his secret. When a posse formed, reckless and eager to hunt whatever beast threatened their livelihood, Eliza confronted Caleb in his office, demanding honesty with a courage that surprised them both. And in the charged silence that followed, he realized the greatest danger was not exposure but losing her trust. He told her enough to keep her safe without revealing everything, urging her to leave town until the hysteria passed. But Eliza refused, stating simply that she would not be chased away again, not by fear or by well-meaning men deciding her fate. Her resolve struck Caleb deeper than any accusation, and for the first time in years, he considered the possibility that his loneliness was not a curse to be born alone. The night the posse went out, torches blazing, Eliza followed at a distance, dread and determination pushing her forward. And when chaos erupted in the hills, shouts, gunfire, panic, she saw the truth revealed in flashes of moonlight. A massive wolf standing between the men and the danger they sought, eyes bright with intelligence and pain, defending rather than attacking. And as understanding crashed over her, she felt not horror, but fierce clarity. She stepped into the open, calling Caleb's name, her voice cutting through fear like a blade. And in that moment the wolf shifted, form bending and reshaping into the man she knew, naked and unashamed in his truth. His gaze locking onto hers with vulnerability laid bare. The posse faltered, shock cooling their bloodlust. And Caleb spoke then, not as sheriff or beast, but as protector, explaining his oath, his burden, the countless times he had saved them unseen. And though not all believed, enough did to lower their weapons, shamed by the realization of how close they had come to destroying their own guardian. In the aftermath, as dawn softened the land, Eliza and Caleb stood together on a ridge, the weight of secrets lifted, replaced by something fragile and powerful. And Eliza told him she had been rejected once for who she was, and would not reject him for what he was, not when his heart was so plainly good. Caleb, who had lived half a life in restraint, found himself daring to hope, and as he offered her not protection but partnership, a choice freely given, Eliza accepted, knowing that home was not a place promised by an advertisement, but a bond, forged through truth and courage. Together they returned to town, not as savior and saved, but as equals, ready to face the challenges ahead. And as seasons turned and whispers faded into legend, the lonely sheriff and the rejected bride built a life that bridged human and wild, proving that sometimes the greatest rescue is not from danger, but from the belief that one must face the world alone.